In this video, I'm going to show you how to make a variety of watercolor textures with table salt, rubbing alcohol. We'll also be using Sharpies or Micron pen. You'll need a paint palette, a few different watercolor brushes or acrylic brushes will also work. I'm going to use a dropper. You'll need a cup for water. We're going to use some tissue. I'll also be needing some tape and of course watercolor, whatever colors you would like to work with. Today I'm going to be using green, yellow, orange, magenta, and blue. So the first thing I'm going to do is divide my paper into 4 sections, one for each technique, and then we're going to do one on a full-size piece of paper with the various techniques all together. Now the first step is to take your watercolor brush, a wash brush, clean water, and I'm going to do what's called flooding the paper. Hopefully you can see that. There's quite a bit of water on here. And then what I'm going to do is take whichever colors I'm going to work with. I'll start with yellow. And I might put some yellow in there. I may put some orange in there. One of the keys of watercolor is to not overwork. Let the watercolor do its thing without being too bossy or pushy about it. Whatever sort of design you're interested in. Now that's all I'm going to do. I'm going to let it just kind of wash itself around. My first technique is going to be tissue blotting. And I like to take my tissue paper and wad it up, scrunch it up so that I get lots of different texture in there. And what you'll do is hold it there 3 or 4 or 5 seconds, lift it up, hold it somewhere else 3 or 4 or 5 seconds, lift it up, press down, lift it up. What that's going to do is create all these different hard edges. We're going to come back to that in a minute. My next technique is going to be salt. So again, I'm going back to my clean water. I'm going to apply clean water whatever colors I'm going to work with. In this case, let's try a little bit of green. And maybe a little bit of the blue. Mix blue and green together, you get teal. Work in some other colors. Now the problem is I can come in with magenta and it mixes pretty well with the blue, but if I try to mix magenta and green, it's going to make brown. So I'm going to let them go up right up next to each other. Now with salt, you have to let this soak in just a little bit. If it's too wet, the salt will just dissolve and you won't get the texture you're looking for. Not putting too much, just a tiny amount will do the trick. The next technique is going to be rubbing alcohol. So I'm going to put rubbing alcohol in a little container. Clean water, I'm going to flood the paper. Whichever colors you want to work with. Let's try coming back to some of this orange. And again, you can come in with other colors, but you got to be a little bit careful blending colors that mix to make brown if you don't want brown. So I might come in with a little bit of green. I'm not going to over blend it. Just going to kind of let it do its thing. Now what we're going to use this dropper for, you're going to take the dropper and I'm just going to drop a few drops. And you can see the rubbing alcohol has an effect on it. Creates almost like an amoeba type thing. I can also use a brush. If you were to just touch and let it follow, it'll kind of do its weird thing. So we'll come back to that. My last watercolor technique is going to be with bleach. I'm going to start with clean water. I'm going to flood the paper. Now I'm going to take my dropper, and this time I'm going to put a little bit of bleach. Now the bleach is going to be very aggressive. It's going to turn the paper, or turn the color back to white. So you can see what that's doing. I can also use a brush with the bleach if I want to just put in a small area. You can also drop with a brush. So you can see with the bleach, it's turning it completely white. So it's kind of like the eraser. So as you can see, where we blotted creates these nice hard edges. The salt makes some interesting texture. The rubbing alcohol isn't as aggressive as the bleach, but it does leave some interesting shapes with the dropper. You can also drag the brush and create some texture that way. The bleach, incredibly aggressive. It's just going to take it right back to the white of the paper. Now one really cool thing about bleach is you can also take a brush with bleach and you can draw with bleach. You can make designs, patterns. Wherever that brush touches with the bleach is going to leave a perfectly clean edge. You could even draw designs with it. So if you were painting with a watercolor and you wanted to erase, you could use the bleach. So my first step is going to be to flood the paper. So I'm going to take my wash or mop brush. I'm going to flood the paper. Now the colors I'm going to use: magenta, let's see, let's use some of this orange, let's maybe use a little bit of yellow. About a little bit of blue. And let's go. Let's start with some blotting. So I'm going to wad my tissue to create some texture. I'm going to crunch and crumple to create as much texture ridges as possible. And then I'm going to hold it 3 to 5 seconds. I'm going to move it around, hold 3 to 5 seconds. So there's some blotting. I'm going to put a little tiny bit of salt just up toward the top. I don't like a lot of salt in this particular kind of project. Now we're going to come in with the rubbing alcohol. And then maybe just one little spot of bleach. Maybe right there. Now let's let this dry and see how it turned out. So what happened here, with the tissue blotting, we got a lot of these really cool hard edges. With the rubbing alcohol, create some interesting shapes and effects. The bleach went straight white, and the salt, I went very light. I just wanted a little bit of texture. So what we're going to do is take this and turn it into a texturized watercolor mixed media. We've got Sharpies, we've got pen, we've got watercolor, and we also can use good old-fashioned Prismacolor pencils.